So I don't think I've ever seen a system unveiling quite like the Nintendo Switch 2 in terms of, well, the amount of confusion surrounding the system. And this isn't just extending to, the common folk who I like to take into account, the people who, don't follow video game news daily or spend their time online, the more casual crowd of the video game side of things, which is honestly much larger than the dedicated side of things. But even the dedicated side of things, even fellow YouTubers and news outlets and websites and stuff like that have reached out to me asking for clarification on various related things, because even they're confused. People whose job this is are confused on the subject matter. And I think Nintendo kind of brought this upon themselves with a few of these different things. So basically today, I want to talk about the confusing elements that people seem to have with this system and try to give some clarification. Some of the things I'm not going to have the answers to, because the only people that have the answers to them are Nintendo, but I do feel like I can help a little bit. Maybe, hopefully. So share this video with your friends if you learned something in this. Now, of course, the first thing has to be Mario Kart World and the Mario Kart World price point. Now, this was a whole smorgasbord right from the jump, because a very, very popular website that I actually follow, and I've reported on stories that they have written before in the past on this channel, decided to run with the $80 digital, $90 physical narrative. And while that may have been applicable in some regions, people are taking that as fact. I can scroll through my Facebook feed right now that has a lot more casual gamers, and there are still gamers out there who think that Mario Kart World is a $90 game in the United States if you buy the game physically. It caused a massive ripple effect within the video game reporting sphere and what people thought the price of this game was going to be. Now, of course, all of the journalists band together and condemn that website for reporting false information, or at least leaving out major context. Oh, wait, they didn't, because they only do that with YouTubers. They never hold their own accountable. Yeah, I'm taking shots at y'all, deal with it. But the fact of the matter is, this was kind of sloppy reporting that created a narrative. Not really Nintendo's fault. But there's still the elephant in the room with Mario Kart World and the subsequent confusion that it is causing. Why is this game $80? Why did you decide to make this game $80? You have only done one $70 game previously with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and many people had questions as to, well, why that was a $70 game. So why is Mario Kart World an $80 game, but Donkey Kong Bonanza is a $70 game? Are you saying that Mario Kart World has more money put into it? Are you saying that it is a higher quality game than a game like Donkey Kong Bonanza? And of course, what did Nintendo do to explain this price point? Oh, it's based on retailers and what retailers are saying. No, you boob. Okay, you set the price of these things. You tell retailers what the MSRP is, and they go along with it. That's not how any of that works. And anyone who's worked in retail before understands that that is not the case. Not even just from a video game perspective, but from any perspective. So why is Mario Kart World this mythical $80 game? What other games are going to be $80? Because you have to assume that other Nintendo Switch 2 games are going to be $80. Now, there is a Mario Kart Direct for Mario Kart World happening. I believe the date is April 17th, and maybe they're going to show off more of the game then to kind of potentially justify the $80 price point. But is there going to be anything within that justification to make this game seem like $80? Because I think the biggest problem isn't necessarily that there is an $80 game. I think people expect games to go up eventually. We, of course, saw the $70 game introduced with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, but it's the fact that it's Nintendo that is bringing in the $80 game, the first standard edition game that is $80. And, is there going to be subsequent DLC? This, that, and the other? Are you going to have to pay for this DLC? A lot of questions are surrounding Mario Kart World. Now, thankfully, some of these may be answered, but I don't think we're ever going to necessarily get a clear-cut answer from Nintendo unless it comes down to the shareholders. The shareholders could press back against Nintendo on this during the next shareholder investors briefing where they can ask questions, and maybe we'll get a little bit more of an insight. I'm sure it's once again going to be a nothing answer, but when you consider that it's Nintendo, the usually wallet-friendly company that is now leading the charge for the $80 game, it's a tough pill to swallow and a confusing one as well. Now, the next thing, I don't know that this is necessarily Nintendo's fault as far as the confusion is concerned, but I think we could place it on them at least just a little bit, and that is the Switch 2 pre-orders in the United States as well, because you could pre-order the system in other regions. Now, Australia has done pre-orders, the UK has done pre-orders, France has done pre-orders, but for the United States, now we have to wait because you have to assess the ongoing tariff situation. And on one hand, I do understand, you're a business. I get it. But you are a very successful business. And if your first batch of systems had to be sold at a bit of a loss or something like that, is that really crippling to the company? Is that really something that's going to hurt the company in the long run? I mean, you're planning on selling software. You make the money on the software, not the hardware anyways. The hardware margins are razor thin to begin with. So if you go a little bit into the red, but you're selling more software because of the fact that there is more hardware out there, that to me seems like a more positive thing. This is something we talked about on the Spawncast over the weekend as well, where it's kind of like, if you have to adjust something, adjust it as necessary, adjust it as needed, not necessarily a preemptive adjustment when you've already came out and talked about a price point. Now, allegedly, the price point for the system also factored in things like tariffs as well in the United States. So that is something worth mentioning with this. But I feel like at the end of the day, when you've kind of committed to a price point and you've committed to a pre-order window, considering that the system comes out in June, like it's just kind of bad optics for Nintendo to kind of pull this back. Understandable from a business perspective, but from the perspective of the consumer, to kind of be like, oh, this is the day you could pre-order it. Wait, just kidding. And, the price may adjust. If you're not going to adjust the price, what's the point of delaying the pre-order? That's my major question. That is where confusion lies with me. If you're not planning on adjusting the price of it, what's the point of delaying the pre-order to see what the tariffs are doing? It's something to keep in the back of your mind. Once again, leading into confusion with the Nintendo Switch 2. And of course, the final thing. This is probably the biggest one. $80 games, that's one thing. The fraudulent $90 game in the United States thing, that's one thing. The pre-orders, that's one thing. But the amount of types of games on the Nintendo Switch 2, this still has people confused. And this is mostly Nintendo's fault. So you have your backwards compatible Switch 1 games on the Nintendo Switch 2 that are based on, what MVG was saying the entire time, and all these armchair developers on Twitter who have never released a video game. They've never programmed a video game. We're so quick to jump down that man's throat, but he was indeed right about how this was going to work, because there are currently a laundry list of compatibility issues that should be ironed out by the time the system comes out. But you have your standard Nintendo Switch 1 games that will work on your Nintendo Switch 2. Then you have your Nintendo Switch 1 games that are getting free upgrades on the Nintendo Switch 2. So I'm guessing if you pop in your cartridge or you re-download your digital copy of the game, that will get a bit of an enhancement on the Nintendo Switch 2. However, this is not a Nintendo Switch 2 edition of a game. This is simply a free patch for the original game that will have some benefits in terms of graphics and I guess probably frame rate as well. In between that, you then have the Nintendo Switch 2 edition games for it, where you have the games that have increased either graphics, frame rate or resolution or stuff like that. And then within that subsect, you have two different types of Nintendo Switch 2 edition games. You have the enhanced graphic games, and then you have the games that have additional story content. Now, most of the story content stuff seems to be priced at a different price than the Nintendo Switch 2 edition games that are just utilizing a visual upgrade. So if there's additional content added into it, it's going to be an $80 game, or there is a higher price point to upgrade your Switch 1 version to the Switch 2 edition, unless you're talking about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, because if you own one of those two games or both of those games, that will be included in the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack to upgrade to the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game. But it's kind of interesting because there's also a phone application that you can use as well for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which doesn't really add necessarily content to the game, but it does offer some substance into the game as well. Yet that is being offered on Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. So the mindset is currently that if it's a game like Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild or Metroid Prime 4, that it will be a $10 upgrade to upgrade from the base game to the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game. If it is a game that includes additional story content or new content modes like Super Mario Party Country Bear Jamboree or Kirby in the Forgotten Land, it is a $20 upgrade. Now, Nintendo themselves have not said a single word about the pricing upgrades. We are learning about these things just from the price point of the physical Nintendo Switch 2 editions of these games that, of course, have their own pricing out there. Something like Kirby, which is $60 on the Switch 1, is now $80 on the Switch 2, whereas a game like Breath of the Wild, which is $60 on the Nintendo Switch 1, is now only $70 on the Nintendo Switch 2. But then again, when you have the Nintendo Switch 2 version of a game and you purchase it, it does seem like you are really just purchasing the Switch 1 version of the game and receiving a download code inside for the additional Switch 2 content, making the physical edition not truly a physical edition, and then you have Nintendo Switch 2 games that only work on the Switch 2. How did you make this so complicated? How did you? I literally just did a 5-minute tirade trying to explain the different versions of games for the Nintendo Switch 2. And if you honestly sit there and say, that's not confusing, and what are you talking about? That's not confusing at all. You're a moron. You're a moron. Because even I get confused over this. Even I am kind of like looking at this from a perspective of like, wow, this is a lot to take in. This is a lot to take in as someone who does this full time, who talks about video games and studies the video game industry full time. Imagine the mom at Walmart. Imagine the dad at Walmart. And that poor Walmart employee trying to, or at GameStop. Imagine working at GameStop right now, where some mom comes in with like her 3 snotty kids, and they're all, blah, 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 and this GameStop employee has to explain to the mom all of these different things with this system. Now, whose fault is this? I mean, it has to be Nintendo's fault, right? They're the ones who decided to do all these different things. Switch 1 standard games that will play on the Switch 2, no enhancements. Switch 1 games that will have a slight enhancement on the Nintendo Switch 2 for free. Switch 1 games that have Switch 2 editions on the Nintendo Switch. However, there are 2 different types of Switch 2 editions. There are Switch 2 editions that have just graphical content. I don't know how that makes it much different than the free versions of the upgrades, but I guess it's a substantial boost or something like that. And then ones that have story content, both of which are at different price points, but some of them are going to be included in Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. We don't know the price point of them, but if you were to buy the physical edition of the Switch 2 edition, you have a code inside to get that Switch 2 additional content, meaning you have to connect to the internet and then Switch 2 versions of the game. That's not normal. That is not normal. And then that's not even factoring in the digital download card games that don't have anything on the cartridge whatsoever, and you just connect to the internet and download it. So yes, this has been very confusing. And I'm hopeful that this video will help people and maybe guide them a little bit with this, because even I need a little bit of guidance here with this. This is not normal. This is not a normal system. And you can say, oh, it's a new era, it's a new generation, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. But all because something is new doesn't necessarily mean that it was changed for the better. Sometimes simplicity is key. And for Nintendo to go from the simplistic, cheap option to the convoluted, more expensive game option is quite a bit of a culture shock for a lot of people. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of all this. Did you learn something in this video? I feel like there's people that are going to learn a few things about the Switch 2 in this video. And if so, what was the thing that you learned? And be sure to share this with your friends and your enemies and Nintendo lovers and Nintendo haters. I don't care. I welcome everyone here. As long as you're watching, I still get paid. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, share, hit the bell as well so you're not missing out on any craziness that happens, because I'm uploading all the freaking time now. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.